Good morning, storytellers, and welcome back to StoryForge Academy's Advanced Screenwriting course. Today's session is a powerful one, perhaps the most subtle and challenging skill any writer must master: dialogue and subtext. We're going to learn how to write conversations that don't just talk, but reveal. How to make silence speak, how to make lies feel true, and how to let emotion vibrate beneath every line. By the end of this class, you'll understand how great dialogue works on two levels: what's being said and what's really being said underneath. You'll discover how to replace flat exposition with tension, contradiction, and emotional truth. So if you've ever written a line that sounds too obvious, or a scene that feels lifeless, today's lesson will show you how to bring it alive through the music of what's not spoken. If you enjoy these lessons and want to keep learning the art of cinematic storytelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to StoryForge Academy, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a class. Your journey to becoming a professional screenwriter continues right here, one scene at a time. She was still speaking when a commotion erupted outside. We strained to look through the narrow slit of the window. Several figures stood by the freshly dug pit. Then from the steps of that accursed cellar, two men emerged, brutally dragging a body wrapped in a blanket. They tossed it mercilessly into the grave, shoveling dirt over it without a shred of humanity. The Indian woman whispered, "Is that one of the three?" My heart sank. "No," I managed to choke out. "It's your friend." "They buried her." The woman crumpled, weeping uncontrollably, her body racked with silent, agonizing sobs. Just then I saw two figures approaching our room. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. The door swung open. The two men entered and began to speak to the Indian woman. She no longer had the strength to cry. No soul left, no power to sob, no tears left to shed. The two men left. I moved toward her, and she, in turn, pulled me into a desperate embrace. Her voice was barely a whisper against my ear. "These bastards say a real master. Forger from Egypt will arrive in 2 or 3 days. She pulled back slightly, her eyes empty. "They said, you only have 2 or 3 days left to enjoy the last pleasures of your life. They said tonight the Khan wants to stay in this caravanserai, and he wants to make it the best night of your life." I didn't understand. "What does that mean?" I asked. She explained, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "That day they brought us here, they wanted to break us, to make us do anything to survive. They showed us the mummifying body of a little girl and said, 'Which one of you is willing to become an eternal mummy? We only need one of you.' They told us, 'Tonight, whoever can satisfy the Khan will live. And so, if you don't want to be the one who gets mummified, tonight you must please him with Indian dancing, singing with flirtation, and giving in to his every sexual desire.'" She closed her eyes, a shudder running through her. That night, my friend and I felt like we were competing in the most breathless race in the world, with life as the reward. We danced, we sang, we exposed ourselves, we submitted to his every sexual demand. Finally, the Khan said, "You are both excellent. I cannot choose." He took a coin from his pocket, flipped it, and the lot fell to my friend. Her voice broke, then continued with a chilling resignation. "Now, these two bastards say either enjoy yourself for the next 2 or 3 days, or they'll finish you off." The Indian woman simply replied, "No." They told her they'd be back in an hour. Either she would go with them willingly, or they would drag her body to the cellar for the master to begin his work. I was going mad. I saw a grim, resolute certainty in the Indian woman's face. She was ready for death. It was as if in the past 2 months, she had died and come back to life 1,000 times, And now death itself was old news to her. "I have friends," I pleaded, my voice hoarse. "They will surely come in 2 days. We will be saved. Please, don't surrender to death." Tears streamed down her face as she looked at me, a flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. "Are you sure there's a chance? Will your friends really come for us?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Don't doubt it," I insisted, forcing conviction into my voice. "Just stay alive." Just then the door opened. The Indian woman, still looking at me with pleading eyes, was led out of the room. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness. I sank to the floor, weeping, tears burning my cheeks. Why did I lie to her? What hope? Why did I force her to endure 2 more humiliating days only to die? I hated myself. 2 days in purgatory, buried alive and brought back. Ruben's story to Maria. Ruben took a deep breath, as if the bitter taste of dirt still lingered in his mouth. 2 days passed in the graveyard-like silence of that accursed room in the caravanserai compound. It was as if not even a bird dared to fly. There was no coming and going. It seemed everyone there was reveling and enjoying themselves in their nests. And this, like a sledgehammer, pounded constantly on my soul and mind, especially with the Indian woman's fate. The guilt of lying to that Indian woman would be my greatest torment forever. I cursed myself, wondering how I would ever look her in the eyes again if we met. I was left thirsty and hungry. This could only mean one thing: death. They didn't care about me. I was nothing more than a walking corpse. On the appointed day, the harsh roaring sound of a distant car approaching, and then stopping brought the commotion and brutal life back to the caravanserai. It seemed both the Egyptian master forger and the Khan were present. Noon came and the familiar, heart-wrenching sound of a shovel and pickaxe reached my ears again. A cold shiver ran down to my very bones. I knew this grave now belonged to me. I desperately wanted to mourn myself, to grieve for my impending death. I wept. I was dying without ever seeing my child. Without Anna. I wept for myself and my bitter fate. Sometimes a flicker of thought sparked in my mind that perhaps they intended to bury the expert woman, but I immediately dismissed it. No, if that were the case, why would they have kidnapped her? So this grave was exclusively for me. For about an hour, to the rhythm of the shovel and pickaxe pounding on my soul like a war drum, I wept in my absolute solitude. I was to be buried forever, far from everyone I loved, in a strange place, in a desolate building in an unknown desert. Finally, the door creaked open. 2 men entered and with a harsh gesture ordered me to get up. But I couldn't. My legs were stiff, my lips cracked from extreme thirst. There was no strength left in my body, and psychologically, I was utterly broken. Seeing my inability to rise, they came and lifted me from the floor. With steps that trembled like a weeping willow in the wind, I staggered toward that horrifying pit. It was about 30 meters, but to me, it felt like thousands upon thousands of steps, each one a century of torment. I reached the pit. Moments later, the expert woman was also brought. The Khan, who spoke good Farsi, was arguing furiously with her. Voices escalated, and it seemed the Khan had failed to persuade her to cooperate. Suddenly, the Khan gestured to one of his men, and that man brutally threw me into the pit and began to bury me alive. Cold, heavy dirt poured over me with each shovel. I couldn't even scream. I was mute, my tongue tied. The feeling of suffocation, of being buried alive. Shovel after shovel of dirt was thrown over me when all at once everything stopped. An absolute silence followed. It seemed the expert woman had, at the last moment, declared her readiness to cooperate. They pulled me out of the pit. Only then did they realize that my leg was severely broken and injured. Still covered in dirt, they dragged me back to that accursed room. This time my hands were unbound, but I had a broken leg. A liberation more painful than captivity itself. Death of a hope. Ruben's final descent. Ruben's voice was a whisper now, as if emerging from the depths of a bottomless well. A few hours passed. Time in that room, like thick, stagnant blood, moved slowly and lifelessly. Again, the door creaked open. The Indian woman looked at me, and I couldn't bring myself to avert my gaze from her. Her face seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. Was it an appeal, a curse, or perhaps a final shred of forgiveness? I don't know. But it felt as if her last wish before death was to see me. They closed the door, and this time not out of fear, but because of those 2 cursed days. I wept and cried for that woman, tears whose burning heat bore witness to my eternal guilt. A few minutes later, the dry, harsh sound of a gunshot jolted every single cell in my brain, a sound that, in the absolute darkness, was the most ear-splitting end. It was over. That Indian woman, who had been the symbol of the last shred of hope and innocence in this hell, was gone. I slammed my head against the wall. The savage pain, accompanied by blood flowing from my head, was my only escape from my inner madness. Absolute silence, like a heavy blanket, enveloped everything. In that silence, my mind relentlessly conjured images of the cannibal brothers. I saw them tampering with the heart of that tender woman, how they gnawed on her liver like a delicious blood-soaked meal. A sickening nausea choked me, but I had no strength left to throw anything up. Life held no meaning for me anymore. I was now forever nothing and empty. No purpose, no hope, no meaning. My only desire was the wish for that grave, a place where I could either wake from this nightmare or sleep forever. A glimmer of hope from the darkness. Victor's return. It was dark now, and I was dying of thirst. Every breath was a dagger to my throat. Again, the sound of the door opening echoed, and I no longer knew what to think, what new horror awaited. I just stared at the door. The door swung fully open, and I remained stunned and fixated on the entrance. Victor was looking at me in disbelief. His eyes held 1,000 unanswered questions. He stared at me, a person broken in spirit, physically shattered, covered in dirt with a bloody face. Only one word, a whisper born of sheer shock, escaped his lips. "Good?" I nodded, unable to speak. Victor immediately came to my aid. Behind him, the expert woman also appeared. Both helped me, and with great difficulty I left the room. Victor, his voice laced with a calming reassurance, said, "It's all over now." My voice was dry and lifeless. "Victor, my world is over. I'm grateful you're here and that you saved the expert woman. But it's too late for me. Just leave me here." I insisted they leave me. I told them I was finished, even for myself, that my soul was dead. Then, a familiar sound sent a shiver through my body. It was the scream of a woman whose heart ached for me, filled with concern. It was the Indian woman's voice. She was alive, and I was in absolute shock. My brain was incapable of processing this immense influx of information. I couldn't even bring myself to ask what that gunshot had been. Reality had so far exceeded my imagination that words simply withered in my throat. Rescue in the night. Treasures and Iranian luties. Reuben's story to Maria. Reuben spoke with a deep sense of longing in his voice. It was completely dark now, and I was dying of thirst. My tongue was stuck to the roof of my mouth, and each breath felt like a knife tearing at a dry, raw throat. Again, the sound of the door opening echoed, and I no longer knew what to think. What new incident or event awaited me? I just stared, empty-eyed and lifeless, at the door. The door swung fully open, and I, like a soul separated from its body, stared in stunned disbelief at the entrance. "Victor!" He was looking at me incredibly. Deep shock rippled in his eyes, as if he were staring at a monster. He had every right. I was no longer the Reuben I once was. I was a man broken in spirit, physically shattered, covered in dirt with a bloody face. Only one word, a whisper born of sheer shock, escaped his lips. "Are you good?" I nodded, unable to speak. My entire being, caught between reality and nightmare, was paralyzed. Victor immediately came to my aid. Behind him, the expert woman also appeared, her gaze filled with concern. Both helped me, taking my arms, and with great difficulty, I left the cursed room. Victor, his voice carrying a calming reassurance that felt like mountains, lifting from my shoulders, said, "It's all over now." My voice trembled. "My world is over, Victor. I'm grateful. I'm even finished for myself. My soul is dead." I insisted they leave me. Let me drown in the same darkness and emptiness that had consumed me. Then suddenly, at the peak of my despair and restlessness, a familiar sound sent a shiver through my body. It was the scream of a woman whose heart ached for me with concern, a voice so familiar, yet in that moment, its sound seemed impossible. It was the Indian woman's voice. She was alive, and I was in absolute shock. My brain was incapable of processing this flood of contradictory information. I was so shocked that I couldn't even bring myself to ask what that gunshot had been. Reality had so far exceeded my imagination that words simply withered in my throat. Even asking a simple question was impossible. The Indian woman, seeing my state, didn't hesitate. She came forward and embraced me tightly. She gently stroked my dirt-laden hair, tenderly pushing the soil from my locks, and said with a choked but resolute voice, "It's truly all over." Meanwhile, the expert woman was talking to the Iranians. They were strange people, all burly and muscular, some with long beards, some clean-shaven, but without exception all were rough. They all had tattoos, but not like the ones we saw in Germany that were for beauty. These tattoos were clearly amateurish, etched onto their bodies with crude lines and without design or pattern, and my gut feeling told me these tattoos weren't for aesthetics, but perhaps a mark of a specific identity or a hidden pact. All of them, without exception, bore the scars of deep and serious wounds on their hands and in faces, evidence of countless skirmishes. The Indian woman, who had seemingly vanished for a few minutes, returned with several bottles of mineral water. I drank greedily, feeling my spirit return to my body, but still I couldn't ask any questions. I just gestured with my eyes towards those strange men and their scars. The expert woman smiled, a smile that seemed to hold a hidden bitterness, and said, "In Iran, these are called Arazello Obash, thugs and hooligans, at least from the perspective of the Iranian government and some of the people. But they define themselves as Lutihe B'Marifat, honorable ruffians. Though I don't know the meaning of luti." We went outside the caravanserai. 4 black Toyota Prados were waiting, with 10 Iranian men. It was decided that 2 of the Iranians would take the Indian woman to the nearest town so she could report to the police. Then several chests were brought out, seemingly found in the Khan's room. Chests filled with priceless antiquities and extraordinary ancient artifacts. The Iranians looked at the antiquities with eager anticipation. Victor was talking to Salvador on a satellite phone, and then the leader of the Iranians spoke to someone next to Salvador. It was clear they were discussing the valuable spoils, and finally the Iranian man loudly declared to everyone, 300,000 euros each. From my perspective, with years of working alongside Salvador, 300,000 euros for each Iranian, which, considering their number, amounted to 3 million euros in total, was nothing compared to all those thousands of years old ancient artifacts. The chests contained 3 large boxes, at least 100 pieces of gold vessels and goblets, and many gold statues. I'd seen single, exquisite 3,000-year-old gold goblets at major auctions go for millions of dollars, sometimes even tens of millions, depending on their provenance, craftsmanship, and historical significance. A collection like this, with so many pieces, would easily fetch tens of millions of euros, if not more, on the black market. Only 2 mysteries remained in my mind. I knew the first would soon be solved, Victor's fate and our place in this equation. But I didn't dare to even think about the second mystery or ask about it. What had happened to those Pakistanis? especially those two cannibal brothers. We headed towards the border. The next day, I was in Iran, under treatment, from the depths of nightmare to a glimmer of hope. The rescue unveiled, Ruben's narrative to Maria. Ruben took a deep breath, his voice still trembling from weakness and shock. Those days, I was hospitalized in Tehran's largest hospital, right next to Malad Tower. From my room window, I'd look at that towering structure and tell myself, before this trip, I saw myself like this tower, soaring high, full of pride. But now I am so utterly ruined that I can't even talk to Anna. The only thing that kept a flicker of hope alive in my heart was the Indian woman being alive. This gave me hope that I could return to life, that perhaps not everything was over. I was lost in my thoughts when my room door opened and Victor walked in. Seeing him, a glimmer of excitement surged through me. I immediately asked, "Victor, what happened? How did this miracle come about?" Victor took a deep breath, his tone a mix of exhaustion and pride. "Well, we work for someone who always has foresight and never acts without a plan. Salvador had prepared this team before we even arrived in Iran." I asked. Surprised. "How so?" He continued. "Well, you know, Salvador deals with major traders in Iran. Through one of those traders who resides in Germany, Salvador managed to enlist this Iranian team. They were in the border town a day before our arrival, and most of them were stationed inside Pakistani territory." I asked, "Victor, why didn't Salvador tell us anything?" Victor shook his head. "Because if we had known, we would have definitely exposed the team. We wouldn't have acted naturally, and the antiquities smugglers would have surely figured it out. When you entered Pakistani territory, they were like shadows, following you to figure out your destination. But along the way, the Iranian team, to avoid raising suspicion with the Pakistanis, had to maintain a advanced screenwriting class, analyzing the climax, resolution, and thematic aftermath of the Pakistan flashback. Good morning, class. We now turn to the climactic final act of the Pakistan flashback. This segment is crucial because it provides the resolution to the external conflict, the mission, while simultaneously delivering the maximum possible internal trauma to Ruben. A screenwriter must master this balance, giving the audience the action they expect, but making the emotional price feel real and devastating. This part of the narrative is structured into 3 intense movements: the death and resurrection of Hope, the unveiling of the rescue plan, and the emotional aftermath. The descent into purgatory and the climactic lie. The beginning of this section focuses entirely on the crippling, psychological torture inflicted upon Ruben after the Indian woman is led away. This is the low point of his character arc. The agony of guilt and isolation. Ruben's immediate reaction to the woman's departure is self-hatred and crushing guilt. Internal torment. Why did I lie to her? What hope? Why did I force her to endure 2 more humiliating days only to die? I hated myself. This confession is essential. Ruben is not just a victim. He is a morally culpable participant, as his lie forced another person into prolonged suffering. This guilt will now become an integral part of his psychological baggage, further explaining his deep-seated anxiety in the present Turkey storyline. The symbol of death. The thirst and hunger he endures, "I was nothing more than a walking corpse," is not just physical neglect. It's a deliberate tactic by his captors to break him, establishing him as ready for burial. Be the mock execution, buried alive. The arrival of the new players, the Egyptian forger and the Khan, signals the execution time. This sequence is a harrowing visualization of Ruben's primal fear. The emotional countdown. The sound of the shovel and pickaxe is repeated as a relentless sound motif, confirming his death is imminent. Ruben's solitary grief. "I was dying without ever seeing my child." Without Anna, humanizes the fear of death, making it about his lost future. The ultimate horror. Being buried alive is one of the most terrifying human fears. The description of cold, heavy dirt, and the sensation of suffocation are crucial sensory details that will forever be imprinted on his psyche. This is the moment that, physically and psychologically, anchors his recurring nightmare of being dragged into a hellish unknown. The interruption and its cost. The sudden cessation of the digging, triggered by the expert woman's last-second agreement to cooperate, is a moment of salvation, but at a terrible price. He is saved from the grave, but his leg is severely broken. This exchange, survival for permanent physical injury, is a common narrative device showing that the hero must carry the scars of his experience literally. The liberation more painful than captivity is the final irony. C. The false climax, the gunshot. Immediately following his resurrection, the narrative delivers a devastating emotional blow. The death of the Indian woman. The symbol of innocence lost. The Indian woman, who had become the symbol of the last shred of hope and innocence in this hell, is executed, off-screen with the dry, harsh sound of a gunshot. This is a powerful, sudden end to her character arc, confirming Reuben's worst fears and maximizing his guilt. Psychological break. Reuben's reaction, slamming his head against the wall, seeking pain as an escape from madness, shows a genuine psychological break. The subsequent hallucinations of the cannibal brothers gnawing on her liver confirm the depth of his trauma and disgust. At this point, Reuben is an empty man whose only desire is the grave. To the rescue and the twist, a glimmer of hope. The resolution of the external plot begins with the unexpected arrival of the rescue team, coinciding with the revelation that the Indian woman is alive. A. The return of the familiar. The return of Victor and the expert woman, Dr. White, provides the immediate physical rescue, but Reuben is too broken to accept it. The contrast. Victor's shock at seeing the dirt-covered, bloodied, broken Reuben good contrasts sharply with his calming reassurance. This juxtaposition highlights the gulf between the rescuer's understanding and the depth of the victim's trauma. The refusal to live, Reuben's insistence that his world is over and his soul is dead, shows he has reached the limits of his psychological endurance. He has lost the will to survive. B. The resurrection of hope. The sudden sound of the Indian woman's voice is the moment of emotional resurrection, the shock of life. This miraculous return shatters the psychological narrative Reuben had constructed in his mind that he caused her death. This event is the catalyst that allows Reuben to reconnect with life. It is the first step toward healing his guilt and reclaiming his purpose. The fact that he can't even ask about the gunshot shows the extent to which reality has surpassed his capacity to process it. The rescue team, the Iranian Lutis. The final stage of the rescue introduces the key players in Salvador's counter-operation. The Guardians, the Iranian team, described as burly and muscular, with crude tattoos and scars, initially appears rough and dangerous. Their self-designation as Ludi ba Marifat, honorable ruffians, introduces a crucial moral ambiguity. They are criminals, but they operate by a code of honor, standing in stark contrast to the absolute depravity of the Pakistani cannibals. This is Salvador's sophisticated use of the black market's internal power structure. The spoils and the price, the scene where the priceless antiquities are valued, with the Iranians receiving a share, 300,000 euros each, confirms the high financial stakes and Salvador's calculated willingness to share the vast profits to secure the outcome. It also emphasizes the immense value of the artifacts that were the original cause of the entire bloody conflict. 3. The final reveal and thematic justification. The concluding dialogue between Ruben and Victor in the hospital provides the much-needed exposition to explain Salvador's foresight, Salvador's strategy, planned betrayal. Victor's explanation reveals Salvador's genius and ruthlessness, foresight and contingency. Salvador, anticipating betrayal and the incompetence of the Pakistani intermediaries, had a team, the Iranians, stationed in the border town before the initial departure. Secrecy as protection. The reason for the secrecy, if we had known, we would have definitely exposed the team, is sound. The less the primary agents know, the more naturally they act, and the less likely the smugglers are to detect the counter-operation. Ruben and the others were essentially bait in a complex, high-stakes sting operation. B. Thematic aftermath. Ruben's final introspection summarizes the cost of the entire experience. The broken tower. Ruben's metaphor of viewing himself as a tower, soaring high, full of pride, contrasted with his current, utterly ruined state, is the perfect summation of his character arc through the flashback. He entered cocky and left shattered. The unanswered question, the second mystery. The narrative deliberately leaves one crucial question dangling. What happened to the Pakistani captors, especially the cannibal brothers? This absence of closure ensures that the fear and the moral contamination of the Pakistani mission will continue to haunt Ruben, feeding his present-day nightmares and motivating his actions in Turkey. This entire sequence successfully resolves the Pakistan plot in a rush of action, while maximizing the psychological impact on the protagonist, thus providing a profound and necessary backstory for the damaged man now, hunting an ancient curse in a remote Turkish village. Screenwriting class, Session 6, Dialogue and Subtext. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we delve into one of the most critical, yet often misunderstood, elements of screenwriting, dialogue and the power of subtext. We're going to use the narrative you've just read, 2 days in purgatory, buried alive and brought back, Ruben's story to Maria, as our primary text for analysis. This section of the story is rich with examples of both effective and problematic dialogue and an incredibly dense tapestry of emotional and psychological subtext. Part 1. Naturalistic dialogue versus explanatory dialogue. The core function of dramatic dialogue is not simply to convey information, but to reveal character, advance the plot, and create conflict. 1. Explanatory dialogue, the on-the-nose problem. Explanatory dialogue, often called on-the-nose or reporting, is dialogue where characters say exactly what they are thinking, feeling, or what the plot requires the audience to know. It kills the drama. Example from the text, analysis of the problem. The narrative section detailing Ruben's thoughts is a clear example of internal explanatory narration that, if directly converted to dialogue, would fail dramatically. The guilt of lying to that Indian woman would be my greatest torment forever. I cursed myself, wondering how I would ever look her in the eyes again if we met. If Ruben were to say to Victor, I feel an eternal guilt for lying to the Indian woman and forcing her to endure 2 more humiliating days only to die. I hate myself and I curse myself. It would be terrible dialogue. Why it fails? It lacks restraint. It tells the audience everything instead of allowing us to infer or experience the character's internal conflict. Drama is in the showing, not the telling. A character who perfectly articulates their complex feelings is not a person. They are a plot device. 2. Naturalistic dramatic dialogue. Naturalistic dialogue mimics real-life speech, but it's always more concise, purposeful and focused than reality. It is dialogue that is active. It is used as a weapon, a defense, a tool to get something. Is restrained. Characters rarely say exactly what they mean, especially in moments of high stress or emotional vulnerability. Reveals conflict. It either surfaces an existing conflict or creates a new one. Example from the text. Analyzing a success. When Victor sees Ruben after the ordeal, Victor, Whisper, born of sheer shock. Good? Reuben nods, unable to speak. This short exchange is magnificent naturalistic dialogue for several reasons. Economy. One word from Victor conveys overwhelming shock, disbelief, and a desperate, hopeful question. Are you okay? Is this even possible? Are you truly alive? It's a complete sentence disguised as a single word. Character revelation. Reuben's simple nod shows his physical and psychological brokenness. He is so shattered he cannot form a word, but he can offer the minimal physical confirmation of survival. Focus on the moment. It focuses entirely on the immediate, shocking reality of Reuben's state, rather than attempting to catch up the audience on all the events. Part 2. The techniques of writing subtext. Subtext is the unspoken thought, intention, or emotion beneath the character's lines. It is what they really mean when they say what they say. Subtext is what makes dialogue dramatic and complex. In the provided text, the entire experience is built on layers of crushing subtext, primarily guilt, shame, and trauma. Technique 1. Dialogue of avoidance and evasion. Characters often speak around the core issue, especially when the truth is painful or terrifying. The audience knows the issue, but the character cannot face it. Example from the text. Reuben's reaction to Victor's rescue. Reuben, my world is over, Victor. I'm grateful you're here and that you saved the expert woman, but it's too late for me. Let me stay here. I'm even finished for myself. My soul is dead. Surface text. Reuben insists he is finished and wants to stay behind. Subtext. The actual, profound subtext here is overwhelming guilt and self-punishment. He is not asking to be left because he is physically tired. He believes he deserves to die because of his lie to the Indian woman. He is equating his internal moral death, his soul being dead, with physical death. He cannot accept rescue until he is forgiven, and in his mind, he hasn't been. Technique 2. Using the unsaid, the dramatic beat. Sometimes the most powerful dialogue is the line that is not spoken. Use parenthetical stage directions, or simply allow the description to carry the weight. Example from the text. The moment of the Indian woman's return. I was so shocked that I couldn't even bring myself to ask what that gunshot had been. Reality had so far exceeded my imagination that words simply withered in my throat. Even asking a simple question was impossible. The unsaid, the question is, what was the gunshot? The fact that Reuben cannot ask this simple, logical question due to shock and emotional overload is an incredibly dramatic beat. Subtext. The subtext of the silence is psychological paralysis. His brain, saturated by trauma, the lying, the burial, the presumed cannibalism, the gunshot, has short-circuited. His inability to speak signals the depth of his brokenness more effectively than any descriptive line of dialogue could. Technique 3. Contrast and contextual irony. The simplest words can carry the heaviest weight when contrasted with the character's reality. Example from the text. The Indian woman's embrace and line. Indian woman. Choked but resolute voice. It's truly all over. Surface text. A comforting final assurance that the immediate danger is past. Subtext for Reuben. This is a line heavy with irony and profound release. The woman he lied to, the one whose death he mourned and felt responsible for, is the one who forgives him, symbolically, by embracing him and releases him from his guilt. The subtext of her words for Reuben is, "You are forgiven. Now you can truly live." Part 3. Analysis of plot and character through dialogue. This narrative section effectively uses dialogue and reaction to advance the plot in the climax of the story. 1. The climax of Reuben's inner conflict, guilt and redemption. The internal monologue about the lie to the Indian woman, leading to his weeping and self-hatred, sets up his internal climax. His subsequent collapse when pulled from the grave and his final descent into suicidal despair, my world is over, is the bottom of his character arc. The Indian woman's return and her dialogue, it's truly all over, serves as his moment of external and internal salvation. Her alive presence and comforting words are a greater rescue than Victor's as they lift the crushing moral burden. This is essential subtext. The plot device, the Indian woman, is also the emotional key to the protagonist's survival. 2. Dialogue and world building. The Iranian Ludis. The dialogue with the expert woman, though brief, serves a vital function. Exposition for cultural context. Expert woman. In Iran, these are called Arazel-o-Obash, thugs and hooligans. At least from the perspective of the Iranian government and some of the people. But they define themselves as Luti-hai ba-marifat, honorable ruffians, though I don't know the meaning of Luti. This single piece of dialogue instantly names the group, the Luti-hai ba-marifat, establishes their ambiguous morality, thugs versus honorable ruffians. Hints at a code, the honor in honorable ruffians, that explains their later, highly professional arrangement with Salvador. This is vital foreshadowing that sets up the next scene. 3. Dialogue as business, the negotiation. The final decisive line of the rescue sequence. Iranian leader loudly declared to everyone, 300,000 euros each! Function. This is pure plot-driven dialogue. It quickly, efficiently, and loudly resolves the mystery of the Iranian team's motivation and the fate of the artifacts. Subtext unity. The subtext is the massive financial discrepancy. 3 million euros for artifacts, worth tens of millions. It speaks volumes about the Iranians' immediate, practical perspective. Cash now versus Salvador's long-term, high-value trafficking game. This dialogue instantly repositions the Iranians as partners and not simply muscle. Conclusion and takeaway. Dialogue is a double-edged sword. When used to convey only information, it is dull and undramatic. When used as a mask for a character's true feelings, when it is layered with subtext, it becomes the engine of dramatic tension. The emotional high point of this entire story section is a woman saying a short, seemingly simple line. It's truly all over. Because of the context and the subtext, that line functions as forgiveness, salvation, and the end of the nightmare. Practice exercise. Writing dialogue with hidden conflict. Your task is to write a 2-person dialogue scene, approximately 10-15 lines total, between Ruben and Victor after they have left the caravanserai compound. But before Victor explains Salvador's plan, the scene must have a hidden conflict. Ruben's subtext. He is still deeply shaken, feeling weak, and questioning Victor's true loyalty. Did Victor really save him? Or was he just part of a larger, cold-blooded plan? He is testing Victor. Victor's subtext. He is relieved that Ruben is alive, but he is annoyed that Ruben is questioning the operation and Salvador's genius. He feels he saved the day. Dialogue should be naturalistic. Do not allow the characters to say their subtext out loud. Would you like to try the exercise now, or would you prefer a brief example scene to guide your writing? Session 6. Dialogue and Subtext. StoryForge Academy, Advanced Screenwriting Course. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Session 6 of our Screenwriting Workshop. Today's topic is one of the most misunderstood, yet powerful tools in a writer's arsenal. Dialogue and subtext. When dialogue works, we hardly notice it. When it fails, we cringe. Great dialogue doesn't simply tell the audience what's happening. It reveals who your characters are, what they want, and what they're trying to hide. Beneath the words, there's always a second layer, the emotional truth that remains unspoken. That's subtext. 1. The purpose of dialogue. Dialogue serves 3 essential functions in screenwriting. 1. Characterization. Every line should reflect a character's worldview, education, emotional state, and background. The way they speak is who they are. 2. Conflict. Drama lives in tension. Good dialogue often carries disagreement, miscommunication, or manipulation. 3. Story progression. Every exchange must move the story forward by revealing information, deepening relationships, or escalating stakes. Dialogue that exists merely to explain the story is not cinematic. That's exposition. And exposition is the enemy of authenticity. 2. Natural versus expository dialogue. Let's compare. Expository dialogue. As you know, Karen, ever since the accident 5 years ago, I've had trouble trusting anyone. This is lazy writing. The character says something only for the audience's benefit, not the other characters. Real people never say, as you know. Natural dialogue. Karen, you never call anymore. James, you know why. Karen, I don't. James, you were there, remember? Here, the subtext tells us what's going on without ever explaining it directly. We feel the history without being told. The silence and fragments invite the audience to think. Film is a medium of implication. Dialogue should suggest more than it says. 3. The power of subtext. Subtext is the invisible heartbeat of a scene. What's really going on beneath the spoken words? Consider this. I'm happy for you. Said sincerely, it's affection. Said with forced politeness, it's jealousy. Said through tears, it's heartbreak. The same line can mean entirely different things depending on tone, context, and what's left unsaid. That's subtext in action. Subtext emerges from conflict between inner emotion and outer expression. When a character hides, represses, manipulates, or pretends, the unspoken truth bleeds through the cracks. 4. Techniques for writing subtext. Let's go step by step through some professional techniques. A. Contradiction between words and behavior. A character says one thing but does another. Their body language tells the truth. Example. A man congratulates his colleague while gripping his glass so tightly it cracks. B. Deflection and indirect answers. People rarely respond directly to uncomfortable questions. Example. Do you still love me? How's your new job? C. Hidden objectives. In every scene, your character wants something. Love, control, forgiveness, power, but they might not admit it. The real game is in how they try to get it. Silence. Silence is dialogue too. What a character chooses not to say is often louder than words. E. Repetition and echo. Repetition of phrases or topics can reveal obsession, fear, or denial. It's fine. You sure? I said it's fine. Now we know it's not fine. 5. Common mistakes in dialogue. 1. Explaining emotions. Never write, I'm sad. I'm angry. I love you. Unless the contradiction makes it ironic. Show it in the action. 2 identical voices. Every character must sound distinct. Their rhythm, vocabulary, and sentence structure should reflect their identity. 3. Overwriting. Real conversation is fragmented. Use interruptions, incomplete sentences, and pauses. 4. Avoiding silence. Don't fear quiet moments. Film is visual. Let silence breathe meaning into the scene. 6. Exercises in subtext writing. Let's practice. Exercise 1. The unspoken truth. Write a short scene, no more than 1 page. between two people who clearly want different things. Example scenario. A daughter wants her mother to admit a lie. A detective wants a confession. A lover wants to say goodbye but can't. You may not use direct emotional words like love, hate, afraid, sorry, trust, or truth. Everything must be conveyed through implication. Exercise 2. The mass conversation. Write a dialogue where both characters are pretending, perhaps polite strangers who secretly despise each other, or ex-lovers forced to be friendly in public. Their words should be civil, but their subtext should scream tension. Example: Lucas, you look happy. Emma, I am. It's amazing what peace feels like after chaos. Lucas, right. Chaos, I remember that. Exercise 3. Object as subtext trigger. Include a physical object that symbolizes the emotional truth. A photograph, a cigarette, a broken necklace. Have the dialogue circle around it without naming its meaning. Example: he picks up the wedding ring from the table. So you kept it. It's just a piece of metal. The audience knows it's more than that. 7. Analyzing great examples. Let's analyze 2 iconic cases. Case 1, Casablanca, 1942. Here's looking at you, kid. 4 words carry nostalgia, love, farewell, and tragedy. The words are simple, the emotion is vast. Case 2, Marriage Story of 2019. The courtroom scenes show how dialogue can weaponize emotion. They argue about custody, but beneath it, they're screaming about betrayal and identity. The legal debate isn't the conflict. The loss of love is. 8. From script to screen. When your script becomes a film, actors, directors, and editors bring subtext to life, so as a writer, you must give them space to act. Don't over-direct through words. Write with restraint. Let your dialogue breathe. Tip: if you can remove half your dialogue and the scene still works, you've probably written strong subtext. 9. Final exercise of the silent battle. Write a 2-page scene between 2 characters who never say what they mean. They could be a husband and wife during dinner after a betrayal, a soldier and his commanding officer after a failed mission, a teacher and student who both know a secret but can't speak it aloud. The goal: make the audience feel the truth through pauses, gestures, and contradictions. 10. Key takeaways. 1. Dialogue is not about words. It's about intentions clashing. 2. Subtext is the electricity running beneath every exchange. When characters speak truthfully, drama ends. When they hide the truth, drama begins. Homework: take a scene from your own screenplay and rewrite it using subtext. Remove all explicit exposition. Ask yourself, what does each character want? What are they afraid to say? How can I show that fear through behavior, not words? That concludes session 6. In our next lesson, we'll explore visual storytelling and cinematic rhythm, how to make your screenplay feel like film, not theater. Until then, listen to real conversations. Notice what people don't say, and let silence teach you more about writing than speech ever could.